Hi there, and welcome to another episode of 411 Pop Culture. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we're going to be talking about the only thing I never understood about Halloween H20. Before we begin, I would like to clear a few things up. First, I am about to engage in what some fans consider absolute blasphemy when it comes to Halloween and Michael Myers. I am going to attempt to analyze Michael Myers. I know a lot of fans in the remakes by Rob Zombie did not care for this overabundance of analysis and digging to find out exactly what made Michael tick, but I would just like to clarify that this is all in good fun because I am a big fan of the Halloween franchise, and Michael Myers is my favorite of the iconic 70s, 80s slasher villains. In terms of my analysis, it will not be incredibly in-depth. Nevertheless, there are those that argue, and I do not exactly disagree, that for something to be scary, there must be some mystery. I do believe something can be scary and also not be mysterious. However, as fans trek through the franchise, 1995 was certainly a time not to be overthinking Michael Myers, but there are fans that became incredibly angry when people try to overthink what Michael does, what he does, and we end up with things like the Thorn Cult or trashy family histories, etc. They want the simplicity of it. Yet, I also think that sometimes leaving too much to mystery can be problematic, especially considering the history of the horror genre. For way too many years, and still to some, the horror genre was something to be looked down upon. Many sensational and brilliant performances have been overlooked simply because of the genre that they belong to. The fear of the unknown can be a powerful thing, whether it be the xenomorphs from the Alien franchise or even Michael Myers himself. There's something scary when the origins are left unknown. However, that's what became divisive later with Alien Covenant and Prometheus and all that, and I agree to an extent, but when you have certain films, you have the first film like Halloween, simple, etc. At a certain point, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or Aliens 1, 2, 3, 4, we have those movies. We will always have those movies, and they will always be mysterious. And when we watch them with friends, they will be just as fun when we watch that a mystery unveil. But at some point, it is nice to get something new. And these days we have so many different sort of timelines or reboots where things can just pick up and start over if it gets too complicated. So sometimes it is fun just to ride the ride and see where it takes you. And like I said, the fear of the unknown is a powerful thing, but knowledge can also be a powerful thing. Knowledge and understanding can be very scary and horrifying, and sometimes show just how ingenious the horror genre really is. I love Halloween H20. I don't necessarily love the name, but this film came out right after my true love for horror films began. It was the prime time for my generation for horror. I was in my mid-teens, and I grew up on 1980s horror flicks. I have two older brothers, and their particular fandom belonged to Friday the 13th Jason or Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger, and for whatever reason, I came to Michael Myers on my own in my early teens. And this was right when Scream had come out. So this resurgence was just building. Horror love was in full force. If there was a new horror flick coming out, I was at the theater opening weekend. I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, The Faculty, Scream 2, and even Scary Movie. Being that just before Scream came out, I realized that Michael Myers and Halloween were actually my favorite. Not to mention that Jamie Lee Curtis was my favorite actress after True Lies, and it was the perfect storm for me personally to see Halloween H20, which I did. 6 times in the theater, which, by the way, being 16, just getting my first car, not having a full-time job, that was actually an impressive thing. So, it comes to be what this video is really about, and my question is, from the timeline of Halloween 1, 2 to H20 and Resurrection, what was Michael Myers doing for those 20 years? To begin, let's answer what was John Carpenter's original thematic question from the first film. What is the boogeyman? According to the dictionary, the boogeyman is an imaginary evil spirit or being used to frighten children or a person or thing that is widely regarded as an object of fear. So, if the Halloween franchise's major theme is that Michael Myers is a symbolic representation of the boogeyman, then does that make him human or supernatural? Or a little of both? If he was once human, then how did he transfer into this evil representation? If we follow the Thorn Cult timeline, he was never exactly supernatural. Instead, supernatural things happened to him. He had been hearing voices in 1963 prior to Halloween night. Then, on the night in question, he was staying at Miss Blankenship's house, of which she must have had some involvement or influence, and proceeded to give in to those voices and kill his older sister. Now, let me be clear, at the beginning of this video and at the end of this video, I love Halloween, and Michael Myers is hands down my favorite iconic slasher villain. I am ambivalent as to whether or not he is supernatural or a flesh and blood human being. Or even half and half or both. I don't care and I do care. I want to see him matched against a worthy final girl, preferably one that has established herself in the series, such as Jamie Lee Curtis or Danielle Harris. And preferably Michael Myers versus one of the characters those two actresses have played, such as Laurie Strode or Jamie Lloyd. But it's fun to analyze these sort of things, so let's go. But again, now that we have so many timelines and resurrections and incarnations, at the end of the day, I am fine with him being a supernatural effect from the Thorn Cult or a human guy in the new trilogy timeline. It's easy for viewers to hate one idea when we think it is the last, or if we have hated it for 20 or 30 years, such as the hate that Halloween 5 gets. I think when fans believe this is the last film, it's easy to hate on it. Like Rob Zombie's films, people were afraid that this was the route the franchise was going, but it didn't. Halloween 5 gets maligned, but I think there is some really great fun stuff in there. When we thought 6 was the end, people felt screwed. I think it is way easier to appreciate, and we should appreciate, those films now. Like a choose-your-own-adventure novel, we can just go right back to the beginning and start again. But to not appreciate the various sequels is a mistake. Because they did keep the franchise alive. They did. It is possible, but far more unlikely, that we would love Michael as much as we do Jason or Freddy or Leatherface, whomever, if way longer gaps had occurred between releases. Just as problematic if not enough time between sequels occur. Strangely, if he is just a supernatural boogeyman that comes out every 20 years or so, then how can he be biologically related to Laurie Strode and John Tate? In Halloween 4 and 5, he attacked Jamie after being locked away in Smith's Grove Sanitarium. Thus, his whereabouts were accounted for, and of course, he was being taken care of, as we learned in Halloween 6, by the Thorn Cult. And in Halloween 2018, he has no biological relationship to Laurie Strode, but yet his whereabouts are still accounted for as, again, he was locked away in Smith's Grove Sanitarium directly after the events of the original 1978 film. So, what was he doing between those 20 years between Halloween's 2 and H20? First, we can look at the different timelines to establish a sort of foundation. So we go first Halloween's 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, Halloween 1, 2, H20 Resurrection, Rob Zombie 1, 2, Halloween 3 is a separate story, and now Halloween 1 and Halloween 2018. This latest timeline brings back Laurie Strode, changes the revealed brother-sister storyline from 1981's Halloween 2, and is slated to have 2 more films and thus complete a new Halloween trilogy. In each timeline, however, we can track where Michael has been between movies, except the H20 Resurrection timeline. In all timelines stemming from the original film from 1963 to 1978, he is at Smith's Grove Sanitarium. In the first time, to 456, aka the Jamie Lloyd Thorn Cult timeline, the longest gap is 1978 to 1988. Again, Michael is in Smith's Grove after the hospital explosion in Halloween 2. From 1988 to 1989, he is down the stream from the mineshaft fall in Halloween 4, being taken care of by a hermit. Then, from 1989 to 1995, he is apparently back at Smith's Grove with the Thorn Cult. He was busted out of the Haddonfield police station and shoved into the back of a van, okay, with Jamie Lloyd. In the latest timeline, 1981's Halloween 2 never happened, he is not related to Laurie, and again, he has been incarcerated at Smith's Grove Sanitarium sans Thorn Cult. But in the H20 timeline, where has Michael been? What has he been doing? The problem is that, arguably, the H20 timeline establishes that Michael Myers is more flesh and blood than supernatural boogeyman. This establishment stems from his sibling relationship to Laurie Strode. In the original film, Michael Myers is the symbolic representation of the boogeyman. This is before we learn that Laurie Strode is his sister, and his real purpose is to not be a so-called boogeyman, but to kill off his family. So while Michael demonstrates supernatural strength throughout the films, until H20 he never just disappears and shows back up again revived. There is always some way that he has survived over the years. In order to come back and kill whichever family members in whichever timeline he is now in. Incidentally, the latest timeline is the best argument for Michael Myers as becoming a symbolic representation of the boogeyman. But nevertheless, his whereabouts are accounted for over the past 40 years. The Jamie Lloyd Thorn Cult timeline of 456 finally came to a head with Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. The plot became incredibly elaborate, but Daniel Farron certainly did a precise job of tying up all those loose ends. Whether people responded well to them or not is another thing, but he did cover all of his bases. Halloween 6, both the theatrical and producer's cut, were not the final outcome he was hoping for, but nevertheless, a defined motivation was given to Halloween fans as to why Michael does what he does in that timeline. Halloween H20 did attempt a much simpler theory as to why Michael does what he does. It is no less out there, but it is presented as a theory nevertheless. Laurie, as Carrie Tate, tells her lover the story of Michael killing her sister at 17, and then trying to kill Laurie at 17. At this moment, she realizes that John is 17, which sets her off and running. Now, a couple problems. First, and to be fair, I can't remember, but it might only be in the TV edit extended scenes of Halloween H20 broadcasted on FX, Halloween H20 lists Judith Myers at age 17. However, originally she was 15, possibly 16, so this theory sinks in the water. Still, not many people will remember that at the time, so it's kinda cool. Unfortunately, they only compound the issue that he wants to specifically kill his family, which is weird for an incarnation of the boogeyman. The boogeyman is supposed to be less exclusive with whom he goes after, and if in this timeline, Michael Myers is not the boogeyman, then he is a human, and so what was he doing for 20 years? The whole beginning of the terrible Halloween Resurrection establishes that Laurie Strode did not in fact kill Michael Myers at the end of H20, but if he was the supernatural boogeyman, then why would it matter if she did kill him or not? Or if his head was cut off? And speaking again of the Halloween H20 television cut extended scenes on FX, that was the only thing I found disappointing about the beautiful and wonderful Blu-ray limited edition collector's box of the Halloween franchise. These scenes were left out. I am unsure why, but I feel like with an enormous amount of features to create this definitive collection, which to be sure is amazing, to not have these scenes included kinda sucks. So in the Halloween H20 timeline, and feel free to agree or disagree respectfully in the comments below, Michael is more human than supernatural, or, if nothing else, has a human purpose. But what was he doing for 20 years? How did he just show up with his iconic mask? Laurie certainly references the explosion in the Halloween 2 hospital, in which we as viewers saw that mask on fire. She says that she didn't exactly stay to watch his ashes, so that mask and body we saw on fire did happen. So, okay, did he crawl out of the building, all burned up? Did he ironically try and find another hospital to recuperate in? Did he get a job? Because as a human, he has to eat. Did the years pass and he went on his own way? Maybe he had almost moved on, but then 19 years later he saw a brand new replica of his mask and it triggered all his emotions. He spent that last year tracking down Dr. Loomis. Loomis did not completely disappear like Laurie into Carrie Tate. However, he was staying with Nurse Marion Chambers. Michael was never fully introduced to her. He attacked her in the car, but I highly doubt he got a good look at her name tag. Then in Halloween 2, she was out of her nurse's uniform, so he probably had no idea who she was when he broke through the hospital doors. But he must have spent time tracking her down to track down Loomis, because Laurie was now Carrie, but he didn't know that, but figured Dr. Loomis would of course have that information. He broke into Marion's house after Loomis's passing, and the rest of H20 is now history. Over another 20 years history. Yikes, I'm getting old. Of course, there is always the chance that in the H20 timeline he is a supernatural incarnation of the boogeyman. For some reason, he disappeared into the supernatural universe and was manifested back into reality 20 years later. If only Laurie knew, she would not have had to go through so much trouble. Still, I find this unlikely, only because of what it means exactly to be the boogeyman. If he is a boogeyman, he is a strange one to so go exclusively after his relatives, because the boogeyman shouldn't have relatives. Halloween H20 is based off the idea set forth in 1981's Halloween 2 that Michael and Laurie are brother and sister, thus derailing much of the symbolism of the original film. Unlike every other timeline, 2018's new trilogy denies that relationship ever existed, which again is funny because Michael's whereabouts are known. He does not need to be a supernatural entity, and until the next film comes out, we do not know what sort of, if any, boogeyman Michael is anymore. Like 1981's Halloween 2 though, he still ended up in flames. Halloween H20 is definitely one of my favorite entries in the series. Over the years, I have come to find something to love in every single Halloween film, except Resurrection. I can appreciate Jamie Lee Curtis's performance in the first part of the movie, and for their final showdown between them in that one, but then that is depressing in and of itself, and the rest of the film is tainted for me. H20 was something to celebrate and for me to cheer in the end. When I watch the series or think of the series, Halloween H20 ends with that one, or H20 ends the timeline for me in that one. It's a perfect final showdown between Michael and Laurie as siblings. It's been a question in the back of my mind for a long time now, and I thought I would do an analysis of it. All in good fun, of course. Because I've learned that people are more likely to respond to something if they are angry about it than if they enjoy it, I do hope that people will comment below if they have any other theories. Or if you do disagree, please feel free to, but then you will also have a logical defense, because this is supposed to be just fun. So thanks for watching another episode of 411 Pop Culture. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and this is where real people talk about really everything. You can also find me over at Wicked Horror or on the Rabid Dog's House. Thanks for watching.